I'm Rachel Morgan, 32, and I never thought I'd be capable of making a $3 million wedding venue disappear overnight. But when my sister Diana told me I wasn't invited to her wedding, after I'd spent 15 years supporting her through everything, something in me snapped. As I watched her dream venue transform into a construction zone 12 hours before her ceremony, I felt nothing but calm satisfaction. The look on Diana's face when she pulled up in her wedding limo? Absolutely priceless. Was I wrong? Let me explain. Before I dive into this family drama that changed everything, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. If my story of sibling betrayal and sweet revenge resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe to see more real-life family karma stories. Trust me, what happens next in this wedding disaster will make your jaw drop. Diana and I were always close growing up. Just 4 years apart, I was the protective older sister who braided her hair for school, helped with homework, and scared away playground bullies. We shared a bedroom in our modest suburban home, whispering secrets after Mom turned off the lights. We weren't wealthy, but our parents gave us a stable, loving home, until everything changed when I was 17 and Diana was 13. The divorce blindsided us all. Dad's affair with his secretary was straight out of a cliché, but the pain it caused was devastatingly real. Mom fell apart, taking extra shifts at the hospital where she worked as a nurse to keep us afloat financially while emotionally checking out. I remember the night she collapsed in the kitchen after a double shift, sobbing that she couldn't do it all alone. That was the moment I decided someone had to step up. That someone was me. I deferred my college acceptance to State University, taking night classes at community college instead while working full-time at a local insurance office. Diana was entering her difficult teenage years, and without guidance, she'd started hanging out with a troubling crowd. I became her de facto parent, attending teacher conferences, enforcing curfews, and making sure she stayed focused on school. "You don't have to do this," Mom would say during her more lucid periods, but we both knew that wasn't true. Someone had to hold our family together. By the time Diana graduated high school, I had managed to save enough for her first year of college tuition. I'll never forget her face when I handed her the check. "How did you do this?" she asked, eyes wide with disbelief. "One double shift at a time," I replied with a tired smile, not mentioning the student loans I'd taken out for myself that I was still paying off, or the promotions I'd turned down that required relocation. Diana flourished at university. I visited whenever I could, proud to see her thriving in ways I never had the chance to. She studied marketing and developed a sleek, polished persona that seemed miles away from our humble beginnings. I didn't mind, I wanted her to have everything I couldn't. When she met Elliot Montgomery during her senior year, I was initially thrilled. He came from wealth, old money, the kind with family foundations and buildings named after them. He was handsome, well-educated, and seemed to adore Diana. What concerned me was how quickly Diana began to change. The first time I noticed it was during a weekend visit to her campus. We had plans for our traditional sisters' dinner at our favorite pizza place. Instead, Diana called last minute. "Elliot's taking me to meet his parents at the Sovereign," she said, naming an exclusive restaurant I could never afford. Rain check? These cancellations became more frequent. Diana's voice changed, adopting the precise, measured tones of Elliot's social circle. Her Instagram transformed from casual posts with college friends to carefully curated images of charity galas and yacht parties. When I commented on a photo, she'd often delete it shortly after, as if my middle-class digital fingerprints tarnished her feed. Still, I continued supporting her. When she needed $3,000 for a networking retreat that Elliot's friends were attending, I emptied my vacation fund. When she complained about her car looking too budget next to Elliot's BMW, I co-signed her loan for something newer. I told myself this was just a phase, that underneath the designer clothes and new accent, my sister was still there. After graduation, Diana moved to Elliot's city, taking a position at a marketing firm where his father had connections. I drove 5 hours to help her move into her new apartment, spending the weekend assembling furniture and stocking her kitchen. "You don't have to do all this," Diana said, watching me hang curtains while she texted. "That's what big sisters are for," I replied, ignoring the way she winced when I referred to myself as her sister in front of her new neighbors. As Diana and Elliot's relationship progressed, I found myself increasingly sidelined. Our weekly calls became monthly, then sporadic. She'd answer my texts days later with brief replies. When I did visit, Diana would often have unexpected work commitments arise, leaving me alone in her apartment or suggesting I explore the city by myself. After 18 months of dating, Elliot proposed with a diamond the size of a quail egg at a rooftop restaurant with a photographer hiding to capture the moment. The pictures were perfect for social media: Diana's surprised expression, the city lights twinkling behind them, the rain catching the sunset just so. I found out about the engagement along with her other 2,487 Instagram followers. When she finally called me the next day, I swallowed my hurt and congratulated her enthusiastically. "I want you to be my maid of honor," Diana said, sounding like my sister again for the first time in years. "No one knows me like you do." Those words melted all my reservations. My sister needed me for the most important day of her life. Of course I would be there for her, just as I always had been. Little did I know that being there would take on a very different meaning. Diana's engagement launched us into 18 months of wedding planning that would gradually transform from a dream to a nightmare. The first red flag appeared just 3 days after her announcement, when she called me at 7 a.m. on a Saturday. "I need you to take off next Thursday and Friday," she said without preamble. "We're touring venues, and I want your opinion." I rearranged my work schedule, using precious vacation days, and drove the 5 hours to Diana's city. She picked me up in her sleek new car, another upgrade since I'd last visited. "Elliot's mother Vivian will be meeting us," Diana mentioned casually as we pulled into the first venue, an elegant converted barn that cost more per night than my monthly mortgage payment. Vivian Montgomery was a slender woman with immaculately highlighted hair and the kind of cosmetic work that doesn't announce itself but erases any hint of genuine emotion from one's face. She air-kissed Diana and gave me a quick once-over, her smile never reaching her eyes. "So you're the sister," she said, making it sound like I was a curious specimen rather than family. That first day set the pattern. We visited 5 exclusive venues, with Vivian dismissing each one for increasingly arbitrary reasons: too rustic, too modern, the lighting is all wrong for Diana's complexion. My input was neither sought nor acknowledged. On the second day, we found Bellamy Estate, a historic mansion with sprawling gardens that had recently been purchased by a developer who was slowly renovating it into an ultra-luxury wedding destination. The price tag made me gasp: $75,000 for the venue alone. "It's perfect," Diana breathed, while Vivian nodded approvingly. "Isn't it a bit excessive?" I ventured. Diana's face fell, while Vivian's eyebrows lifted fractionally. "This is Diana's special day," Vivian said coolly. "Nothing is excessive for a Montgomery wedding." I bit my tongue, reminding myself this was Diana's wedding, not mine. Later that evening, Diana and I had a rare moment alone in her apartment. "I want to contribute to your wedding," I said, opening my checkbook. I'd been saving for something like this. Diana's eyes widened as I wrote the check for $15,000, nearly my entire savings account. "Are you sure?" she asked, but her fingers were already reaching for it. "Absolutely," I assured her. "I want your day to be perfect." She hugged me tightly then, like she used to when we were kids. "You're the best sister ever." That moment of connection sustained me through the increasingly uncomfortable months that followed. Diana added me to the wedding planning email chain, but my suggestions were consistently ignored or overruled by Vivian. I'd recommend a reasonably priced florist, only to learn they'd booked one that charged $300 per centerpiece. I'd research photographers within Diana's original budget, only to discover Vivian had selected someone who'd shot for Vogue. 4 months into planning, I took another 2 vacation days to attend Diana's bridal shower, organized by Vivian at an exclusive women's club. I wore my best dress, a blue cocktail number I'd splurged on specifically for wedding events, only to find myself the only attendee not in designer clothing. The seating arrangement placed me at a table with elderly relatives and Diana's former babysitter, far from the bride's table where Diana sat surrounded by her new friends, the wives and girlfriends of Elliot's business associates. Throughout the event, Diana caught my eye only once, giving me a small smile before being pulled back into conversation by the woman beside her. The bachelorette party was scheduled for a weekend in Miami. I requested the time off work months in advance and booked my flight. 2 weeks before the event, Diana texted to inform me the destination had changed to Paris. Paris? As in France? I called her immediately. Vivian has a friend with a pied a terre in the 16th, Diana explained. It was too good to pass up. Diana, I can't afford to go to Paris on 2 weeks' notice, I said, my voice tight. My passport isn't even current. There was a pause. Oh. Well, maybe next time. The bridesmaid dress saga was equally painful. Vivian selected gowns that cost $800 each, a sum that required me to pick up extra shifts and eat ramen for weeks. A month after I ordered it, Diana texted that they'd changed the dresses and color scheme. The new dress would be another $950, non-refundable. When I called to explain I simply couldn't afford another dress, Diana sighed. I thought you wanted me to have the perfect wedding. I maxed out my credit card and ordered the dress. 2 weeks later, I was at a coffee shop near Diana's apartment, waiting to meet her for a rare lunch date, when I overheard a familiar voice. Diana and Vivian were seated in a corner booth, unaware of my presence. The dress color really doesn't work with Rachel's complexion, Vivian was saying. She's going to stand out in the photos, and not in a good way. I know, Diana agreed. But what can I do? She's already bought 2 dresses. Well, Vivian lowered her voice, though not enough, she doesn't exactly fit with the wedding aesthetic we're creating. Instead of defending me, Diana merely sighed. I know. I slipped out of the cafe before they saw me, lunch forgotten as I fought back tears. That evening, I checked the wedding website to see if they'd changed anything else without telling me. There, listed under bridal party, were 6 names, none of them mine. I scrolled through the entire site 3 times, thinking there must be a mistake. According to the official wedding website, I wasn't even a bridesmaid, let alone the maid of honor. When I called Diana, she didn't pick up. My text went unread for 2 days before she finally responded, "Can we meet for coffee on Thursday? There's something we need to discuss." By then, I already knew what was coming. The coffee shop Diana chose was in the trendy downtown district, all exposed brick, Edison bulbs, and $7 lattes. I arrived early, ordering the cheapest item on the menu to nurse while I waited. When Diana walked in 10 minutes late, she wasn't alone. Vivian Montgomery trailed behind her, designer handbag swinging. My stomach dropped. This wasn't going to be a sisterly chat. "Rachel," Diana said, sliding into the seat across from me while Vivian sat beside her, creating a united front. "Thanks for meeting us." "Us?" "Not me." "Us?" "What's going on?" I asked, though I already knew. Diana glanced at Vivian, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. My sister straightened her shoulders and launched into what was clearly a rehearsed speech. "As you know, planning this wedding has been complicated. The venue has certain capacity limitations, and with Elliot's family connections, we've had to make some difficult decisions about the guest list." I stared at her, waiting for the actual explanation. When none came, I prompted, "And?" Diana fidgeted with her engagement ring, a nervous habit from childhood she hadn't quite eliminated. "And due to some family politics on Elliot's side and the final headcount, we've had to make some adjustments to the wedding party and guest list." "Just say it, Diana," I said, my voice steady despite the thundering in my chest. Vivian interjected smoothly. "What Diana is trying to say is that we've had to streamline the wedding party to maintain certain professional connections important to Elliot's family. And unfortunately, the final guest list has been at capacity for some time." I looked directly at Diana. "You're uninviting me from your wedding." A flash of shame crossed Diana's face before she masked it with a practiced smile. It's not personal, Rachel. It's just that Elliot's father's business partners all have daughters Diana's age, and appearances are so important in their circle. Vivian's words, coming from my sister's mouth. Not personal? I repeated incredulously. I'm your sister. I've supported you through everything. I gave you $15,000 for this wedding. Several patrons turned to look at us. Diana flushed, her eyes darting around nervously. We'll compensate you, of course, Vivian said coolly, as if discussing a business transaction. Once they return from the honeymoon. Compensate me? The absurdity of it all hit me then. I didn't invest in a stock portfolio. I helped my sister because I love her. Diana wouldn't meet my eyes. We really do appreciate everything you've done, Rachel. And in a perfect world, family would matter more than impressing Elliot's business connections, I finished for her. That's not fair, Diana whispered. No, I agreed, gathering my purse. It's not. As I stood to leave, Vivian added a final twist of the knife. We hope you understand the sensitive nature of this situation and maintain appropriate discretion. The Montgomery name carries certain expectations. I stared at her, then at Diana, who still wouldn't look at me. Don't worry, I said quietly. I won't embarrass you by existing too loudly. I walked out of the coffee shop with as much dignity as I could muster, made it to my car, and finally let the tears come. 15 years of supporting Diana, of putting her first, of building her up, all discarded because I didn't fit the wedding aesthetic. The drive home was a blur. I called in sick to work the next day, unable to face people or explain what had happened. My phone buzzed occasionally with texts from concerned colleagues, but the one person I wanted to hear from remained silent. My parents called that evening. They'd received their formal invitation, with a small note specifying Rachel Morgan not included. Diana had told them some story about venue restrictions, which they clearly didn't fully believe but weren't willing to challenge. Maybe it's for the best, honey, my mother suggested tentatively. Those society events can be so stuffy. You're not going? I asked, suddenly realizing I'd assumed they would boycott in solidarity. Well, she's our daughter too, Dad said uncomfortably. We don't approve of how she's handling this, but they weren't willing to risk losing access to Diana's new glamorous life. I understood then that I was completely alone in this. 3 days later, scrolling through social media in a masochistic haze, I discovered Diana had replaced me with Alessandra Winters, Elliot's ex-girlfriend who was now married to his business partner. The photos from the final dress fitting showed 6 women in identical gowns, arms around each other like lifelong friends. The caption read, "Can't imagine my special day without these amazing women by my side." #bridal party goals. The worst betrayal came a week later, when my cousin Jenna called. I just wanted to say I'm sorry about what happened, she said. What do you mean? Diana told everyone you dropped out of the wedding because you were jealous of her relationship with Elliot. Is that true? The lie stung more than the uninvitation. I hung up without answering and blocked Diana's number. For 3 weeks, I spiraled into depression. I went to work, came home, and stared at walls, replaying 15 years of sacrifices and support, wondering how I'd misread our relationship so completely. Then, 4 days before the wedding, a text came from an unknown number, Diana's new phone. Hey, are you still able to contribute the petit fours for the dessert table? The bakery needs to know by tomorrow. No apology. No acknowledgement of what had happened. Just another demand, as if I were a vendor rather than her sister. Something inside me finally broke. Or perhaps it finally mended, the part of me that had always put Diana first, that had accepted less than I deserved, that had made excuses for her increasingly selfish behavior. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I started my car and began driving, with no destination in mind except away from the suffocating pain of betrayal. I drove aimlessly that night, my mind replaying Diana's betrayal on an endless loop. Muscle memory and subconscious navigation eventually led me to the outskirts of Diana's upscale neighborhood, where Bellamy Estate stood like a monument to everything I couldn't provide for my sister. It was nearly midnight when I pulled over across from the estate's ornate gates. Security lights illuminated the immaculate grounds, and I could make out construction equipment parked near the back of the property. That struck me as odd. Wasn't Diana's wedding just days away? As I sat there, a security guard making his rounds noticed my car and approached. I rolled down my window, prepared to make excuses about being lost. "You looking for the wedding venue?" he asked, shining his flashlight around my car's interior. "Yes," I admitted. "My sister's getting married here this weekend." He nodded. "Better enjoy it now. Place is scheduled for major renovation right after. They're just keeping it pretty for the Montgomery wedding, then tearing half of it down." My interest piqued. "Renovation? In the middle of wedding season?" "New owners," he explained. "Landmark Development Corporation bought it last year. They've been putting off the heavy construction, but they're already behind schedule. Supposed to be luxury condos by next summer." I thanked him and drove away, a tiny spark of an idea beginning to form. At home, I opened my laptop and started researching. Bellamy Estate had indeed been purchased by Landmark Development, a company specializing in converting historic properties into high-end residential buildings. Their website proudly displayed renderings of what the estate would become, the mansion itself preserved as a clubhouse, surrounded by modern, glass-walled condominiums. Digging deeper, I found local news articles about neighborhood opposition to the development. Residents had concerns about traffic, historical preservation, and construction noise. The Planning Commission had initially denied permits, but something had changed their minds. That something, I discovered in a small article from 6 months ago, was James Wright, the CEO of Landmark Development and, according to the society pages, a frequent golf partner of Elliot's father. It's funny how connections work in high society. The same exclusivity that had deemed me unworthy of attending my own sister's wedding had also fast-tracked permits for a controversial development. The next morning, I called my old college roommate Megan, now working for the city planning department. We met for lunch at a quiet bistro away from her office. "Bellamy Estate," she repeated when I brought it up casually. "Oh, that place has been a headache for months. The permits are technically in order, but it's all very expedited." "What do you mean?" She lowered her voice. "Let's just say some commissioners changed their votes rather suddenly. The Historical Society is still fighting it, but they're only delaying the inevitable." "So it's definitely being redeveloped?" "Phase 1 of demolition starts the week after this last wedding. They only got a temporary waiver to finish out the season." Megan tilted her head. "Why the interest?" I shrugged. "Just curious about local development." Megan wasn't fooled. "Rachel, I've known you since freshman year. This isn't about urban planning." So I told her everything: Diana's betrayal, the uninvitation, the lies she'd spread about me. Megan listened without interrupting, her expression darkening with each detail. "That's beyond awful," she said when I finished. "I'm so sorry." "Me too," I said, pushing my salad around. "I just wish there was something I could do. Not to get back at her, exactly, but to make her understand what she threw away." Megan was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, "You know, that temporary permit for Bellamy Estate is hanging by a thread. The city could revoke it with cause." "What kind of cause?" "Safety concerns, code violations, noise complaints from neighbors." She shrugged. "The usual." I stared at her, the spark of an idea bursting into flame. "Hypothetically, how would someone report such concerns?" "Hypothetically?" Anonymous tip line. Building inspector's direct email. Local news. There are options. Megan leaned forward. "But Rachel, think carefully about what you're considering. This isn't returning a bridesmaid dress out of spite." "I know," I said, but my mind was already racing ahead. Back at home, I pulled out the folder where I'd saved all of Diana's wedding emails, the ones she'd sent before cutting me out of the planning. There, in black and white, was everything I needed: the venue contract, the schedule of events, contact information for vendors. I also found something else: a worried email from the venue manager to Diana from 3 months ago, explaining that certain cosmetic renovations might be visible in some areas of the grounds, but assuring her they would be minimally intrusive. Further digging into public records revealed that Bellamy Estate had been granted several exemptions from standard safety inspections due to its historic significance. The temporary permit allowing it to host events while awaiting major renovation had several conditions attached, including no visible construction equipment during events and strict adherence to fire safety codes. I found myself at a moral crossroads. Did I really want to ruin my sister's wedding day? Was revenge worth destroying what remained of our relationship? Then I remembered sitting in that coffee shop, watching Diana and Vivian discuss how I didn't fit the aesthetic. I remembered 15 years of sacrifice met with betrayal. I remembered Diana telling our family I was jealous and had dropped out of the wedding. The final push came that evening, when I saw Diana's Instagram post, a selfie with her bridesmaids at the rehearsal dinner I should have been attending. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to cut out the dead weight to truly soar." #blessed with the best #true sisters. In that moment, any lingering guilt evaporated. Diana had made her choice. Now I would make mine. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you sacrificed everything for, you know that moment when something inside you just shifts. The pain doesn't go away, but suddenly there's clarity. Would you have done what I was planning, or would you have walked away? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Now let me tell you exactly how I executed the perfect wedding venue takedown. With only 48 hours until Diana's wedding, I needed to act quickly but carefully. My plan required precision timing: too early, and they might find an alternative venue; too late, and it would have no impact. The sweet spot was creating a problem serious enough to shut down the venue, but not early enough for Diana to develop a proper contingency plan. I started by creating an anonymous email account and drafting a detailed message to the city's chief building inspector. My years in event planning gave me intimate knowledge of venue requirements and common code violations. I attached photos I'd taken during my venue tour with Diana, strategically highlighting issues that might have worsened during recent construction: exposed wiring near the dance floor area, a blocked emergency exit, temporary structures without proper supports. These weren't fabrications, they were real issues I'd noticed and mentioned to Diana months ago, only to be dismissed by Vivian with "We'll have our people handle it." Clearly, their people hadn't. Next, I created a throwaway social media account and posted in several community groups about concerning safety conditions at the historic property, mentioning I'd seen workers without proper equipment and heard alarming noises that suggested structural problems. I was careful to phrase everything as concern rather than accusation. My third step was the most effective. I contacted the local news tip line with information about how a historically significant property was being damaged by rushed construction while still hosting events, connecting it to the broader issue of development companies ignoring safety regulations. I mentioned that a high-profile wedding was scheduled that weekend, adding urgency to the story. Timing was crucial. I sent the email to the building inspector at 4:30 p.m. on Thursday, late enough that any inspection would likely happen Friday morning, but not so late it would be ignored until Monday. The social media posts went up Thursday evening, when community engagement was highest. The news tip was submitted early Friday morning, in time for the day's assignment meeting. Then I waited, alternating between nail-biting anxiety and grim satisfaction. By 9:30 a.m. Friday, my plan was already working better than anticipated. Driving past Bellamy Estate, I spotted a city vehicle in the parking lot. By noon, there were 3 official cars and a news van. I parked a discreet distance away and watched through binoculars as men in hard hats and official jackets moved around the property, taking photos and making notes. The venue manager, a woman I recognized from our tour, was gesturing frantically, her body language screaming distress. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother: "Something's happening at Diana's venue. She's called 3 times crying. Do you know anything about this?" I didn't respond. At 2:17 p.m., my burner email received an automatic update from the City Planning Department, Safety Complaint at Bellamy Estate, Emergency Inspection Findings. The report listed multiple code violations deemed immediately hazardous to public safety, including electrical issues, structural concerns with recent modifications, and improper storage of construction materials. By 3 p.m., local news was reporting that Bellamy Estate had been temporarily closed due to significant safety concerns. The reporter stood in front of the property as workers began unloading equipment in the background. Behind me, what was supposed to be the site of this weekend's high-profile Montgomery Williams wedding has been shut down by city officials, the reporter said gravely. Sources tell us the venue had been operating under a provisional permit that has now been revoked. I felt a moment of doubt then, a flash of guilt about what I'd set in motion. I nearly called Diana, almost confessed everything. I went so far as to pull up her number on my phone. Then it rang in my hand. Diana was calling me. I answered, heart pounding. Hello? Rachel, Diana said, her voice tight with false cheer. How are you? For a moment I was too stunned to respond. After everything that had happened, she was calling as if we'd simply drifted out of touch. I'm fine, I managed. Good, she said briskly. Listen, I know things have been a bit strained between us, but I was wondering, do you still have contact information for that event planner you used to work with? Jennifer something? No apology. No acknowledgement of uninviting me from her wedding. Just another request for help fixing a problem. Why do you need an event planner the day before your wedding? I asked, though I knew exactly why. Oh, just some last-minute venue issues, Diana said vaguely. Nothing serious, but we might need to make some quick arrangements. I could hear the panic beneath her casual tone, could picture her pacing in her designer outfit while Vivian made frantic calls in the background. I thought you had the perfect wedding team already, I said. What happened to not needing my help? There was a pause. When Diana spoke again, her voice had a harder edge. Look, Rachel, I know you're upset about the guest list situation, but this is my wedding. If you actually cared about me, you'd want to help. In the background, I heard Vivian say sharply, tell her we'll pay her, for God's sake. That was the moment any lingering doubt evaporated. I'm sorry, Diana, I said calmly. I don't think I fit the aesthetic of your wedding emergency. I hung up as she was mid-protest and blocked her new number. By evening, the situation at Bellamy Estate had escalated beyond anything I'd anticipated. What I'd expected to be a temporary shutdown for inspection had turned into a full construction mobilization. Apparently, once inspectors found the initial violations, they discovered many more, enough to trigger the demolition clause in the permit. Construction crews that had been waiting to begin work the following week were called in early. Equipment that had been stored discreetly was now prominently positioned. The elegant driveway where Diana's wedding guests would have arrived was torn up to access underground utilities. I drove by again at dusk. The estate was transformed, construction lights illuminated workers installing temporary fencing around the property. The serene garden where Diana was supposed to say her vows was now occupied by a massive excavator. My phone continued to buzz with messages from family members and mutual friends, all asking if I'd heard about the disaster, if I was in touch with Diana, if I could help somehow. I responded to none of them. Instead, I went home, poured a glass of wine, and prepared to watch the chaos unfold from a distance. The venue had vanished, just as I'd intended. Now I just had to wait for Diana's perfect day to arrive. I woke at dawn on Diana's wedding day, feeling strangely calm. After weeks of hurt and anger followed by days of feverish planning, I'd expected to feel either triumph or remorse. Instead, I felt oddly detached, as if watching events unfold in someone else's life. I dressed carefully in jeans and a nondescript gray sweatshirt, pulling my hair into a ponytail and adding sunglasses and a baseball cap as a minimal disguise. I wasn't planning to get close enough for anyone to recognize me, but caution seemed prudent. By 7:30 a.m., I was parked on a side street with a clear view of Bellamy Estate. The transformation from elegant wedding venue to active construction site was complete. Yellow caution tape encircled the property. A chain-link fence had been erected overnight. Workers in hard hats were already unloading equipment from trucks. At 8:15 a.m., the first wedding vendors arrived, a flower delivery van followed by catering trucks. I watched as they pulled up to the gates, drivers emerging with confused expressions to speak with security guards who turned them away with apologetic gestures. The first hint of real drama came at 9:20 a.m. when a sleek black SUV screeched to a halt at the entrance. Vivian Montgomery emerged, designer heels completely unsuitable for a construction site, and proceeded to berate a foreman who had the misfortune of being nearest to the gate. Even from my vantage point, I could see her arms gesticulating wildly, her normally composed demeanor cracking under pressure. The foreman simply pointed to the official notices posted on the gate. Vivian's response was to pull out her phone and make a call, pacing furiously. 10 minutes later, another expensive car arrived, Elliot's father, judging by his resemblance to his son. More angry gestures, more phone calls, more evident frustration. By 10 a.m., the scene had devolved into chaos. Vendors were parked along both sides of the street, some beginning to unload their supplies onto the sidewalk with nowhere to go. Bridesmaids in matching robes arrived for what should have been on-site preparation, only to find themselves stranded on the street. Their social media accounts, which I monitored through my fake profile, erupted with real-time documentation of the unfolding disaster. "This can't be happening," posted Alessandra, my replacement in the bridal party. "Venue literally torn up day of wedding. At Diana Williams is keeping it together but emergency location needed." A news van arrived shortly after, the reporter who'd covered the safety violations the previous day clearly delighted by this dramatic development. I sank lower in my seat as she set up for a live shot with the estate's demolished entrance as her backdrop. I hadn't anticipated the media attention, but I should have. The Montgomery family was prominent enough locally that their wedding disaster was considered newsworthy. As I watched the reporter speak into her camera, I realized my revenge had expanded beyond my personal circle to become public humiliation. Just before 11 a.m., the moment I'd been simultaneously dreading and anticipating arrived. A white limousine pulled up to the estate gates, Diana's bridal car, right on schedule according to the itinerary I'd memorized. She emerged slowly, already in her wedding dress, an extravagant creation of lace and crystal that had been featured in a bridal magazine spread. Her hair and makeup were flawless, clearly done hours earlier at a salon. For a moment, she simply stood staring at the construction equipment where her flower-lined aisle should have been. Even from a distance, I could see the exact moment reality fully registered. Diana's perfectly posed body seemed to collapse in on itself. She sank to her knees on the dirty sidewalk, the pristine white of her gown immediately stained by dust. A bridesmaid rushed to her side, trying to help her up and shield her from the news cameras now pointed directly at her breakdown. Something twisted in my chest watching my little sister fall apart on what should have been the happiest day of her life. For a brief, mad moment, I considered rushing over, confessing everything, somehow fixing the unfixable situation. Then I remembered her cold dismissal, the casual cruelty with which she'd discarded 15 years of sisterhood. I started my car and drove away. For the rest of the day, I monitored the situation through social media and text updates from concerned relatives. The Montgomery family's considerable influence had secured a last-minute alternative, their own sprawling backyard. Vendors scrambled to relocate, creating a makeshift venue in hours. "Diana is being so brave," Alessandra posted. "True bridezilla would melt down but she's rolling with it. #wedding disaster #still happening." The accompanying photos told a different story. Diana's eyes were red-rimmed despite fresh makeup. Her smile looked pained. Elliot stood beside her looking increasingly irritated as the day progressed. More disasters followed. The wedding cake, being transported to the new location, collapsed in transit. The photographer accidentally deleted half the getting ready photos while transferring files between locations. The wedding coordinator, overwhelmed by the venue change, quit via text message 3 hours before the ceremony. The final blow came courtesy of nature itself. The clear sunny day forecast for Diana's garden ceremony transformed into thunderstorms by late afternoon. Photos showed guests huddled under hastily acquired tents while rain turned the Montgomerys' manicured lawn into mud. My mother called around 8 p.m. "It's been a complete disaster," she said, sounding exhausted. "The ceremony was delayed 2 hours. Diana's dress is ruined. Elliot's mother had some kind of breakdown and left early. Half the guests didn't even find the new location." "That's terrible," I said, trying to sound appropriately sympathetic. "The strangest part is the venue," Mom continued. "Diana says they had all the proper permits, but suddenly yesterday the city shut everything down. Elliot's father is furious. He knows people on the planning commission. He thinks it was deliberate sabotage by a business rival." I made a non-committal sound. "Anyway," Mom sighed, "Diana asked if you were with me. I think she wanted to talk to you." "Did she?" I said evenly. "That's interesting, considering I wasn't even invited." My mother was quiet for a moment. "I know she hurt you, Rachel. What she did was wrong. But today was. I've never seen anything like it. Maybe this is a sign that she needs to reassess her priorities." After hanging up, I sat in the dark of my apartment, surrounded by the silence of my solitary life. The satisfaction I'd expected to feel had materialized only briefly before being replaced by a hollow emptiness. I'd orchestrated the perfect revenge, watched my sister's dream day crumble into disaster, and somehow still felt like I'd lost something precious. On social media, #Montgomery wedding disaster was trending locally. Amateur videos showed guests slipping in mud, the wedding party struggling with wind-whipped decorations, Diana's veil blowing away during vows. What should have been an elegant society event had descended into a farce. I closed my laptop, no longer able to watch. Revenge, I was discovering, tasted nothing like the sweetness I'd imagined. The days following Diana's wedding disaster passed in a strange fog of numbness and periodic guilt. I returned to work, responding to curious colleagues with vague comments about venue issues when they mentioned news reports of the Montgomery wedding catastrophe. No one knew of my connection to the event. I'd long since stopped mentioning my sister at work, her glamorous life so removed from my ordinary one that it felt like fiction. Social media, however, provided an unfiltered window into the aftermath. Diana's carefully curated Instagram, once filled with aspirational lifestyle content, went completely dark for 9 days after the wedding. When she finally posted again, it was a heavily filtered black and white photo of her hand holding Elliot's, their wedding bands visible. The caption, "Not the day we planned, but the marriage we wanted. #love wins." The comments section told a different story. Society friends offered performatively sympathetic messages while clearly relishing the drama. "So brave, and still stunning despite everything," and the particularly revealing "everyone's talking about how gracefully you handled such a catastrophe." Everyone was indeed talking. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard the wedding had become a cautionary tale in Diana's social circle, the gold standard of wedding disasters against which all future mishaps would be measured. Elliot's mother Vivian had reportedly suffered what was delicately termed a stress episode at the reception, publicly berating the catering staff before being escorted to a quieter room by concerned family members. The Montgomery name, so concerned with appearances, had become associated with the very public meltdown their wealth and connections had failed to prevent. 2 weeks after the wedding, Diana and Elliot departed for their honeymoon, shortened from 3 weeks to 10 days due to unforeseen circumstances. The photos they posted from the Maldives looked beautiful but strained, Diana's smile not quite reaching her eyes, Elliot often absent from the frame. They returned to a new problem. Local news reported that the developer of Bellamy Estate was pursuing legal action against the city for improperly accelerated enforcement actions. The Montgomery name was mentioned prominently, connecting Elliot's family to what was characterized as special treatment now gone wrong. I was grocery shopping 3 weeks after the wedding when my phone rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Rachel?" Diana's voice was hesitant, almost unrecognizable without its recently acquired polished confidence. I nearly hung up but found myself responding. Yes. Can we talk? Please? We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop different from the one where she'd uninvited me from her wedding. I arrived early, claiming a corner table and ordering a plain black coffee to occupy my hands. When Diana walked in, I barely recognized her. Gone was the sleek, polished socialite who had dismissed me from her life. This Diana looked exhausted, her designer clothes hanging slightly loose on her frame, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Without her usual perfect makeup, I could see dark circles under her eyes. She slid into the seat across from me. Thank you for coming. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak first. I've been trying to reach you, she said. I thought maybe you changed your number. I blocked yours, I admitted. After you called asking for help with your wedding emergency. Diana winced. I deserved that. We sat in uncomfortable silence until Diana finally spoke again. Everything's falling apart, Rachel, she whispered. The wedding was a complete disaster. Everyone's still talking about it. Elliot's family blames me for not double-checking the venue situation. My in-laws hate me. Elliot. She trailed off, blinking rapidly. What about Elliot? I prompted, curiosity overcoming my resolve to remain detached. He's barely speaking to me, Diana admitted. He says I embarrassed his family. Like I somehow caused the venue to be shut down. She gave a hollow laugh. His mother suggested I should have slept with the building inspector to get an exception. I felt a twinge of guilt that I quickly suppressed. I'm sorry things are difficult, I said carefully. But I'm not sure why you're telling me this after making it very clear I wasn't part of your life anymore. Diana's eyes filled with tears. Because you're the only person who ever really cared about me for me. Not for what I could do for them, or how I made them look, or who my connections were. She reached across the table as if to take my hand, then stopped herself. I miss you, Rachel. I miss my sister. The words I'd longed to hear for months now rang hollow. You miss me now that your perfect life is showing cracks. Where was this sentiment when you were uninviting me from your wedding? When you were telling family I dropped out because I was jealous? Diana had the grace to look ashamed. Vivian said it would be easier if people thought it was your choice. I knew it was wrong, but I was so caught up in creating the perfect image. And now that the image is tarnished, you're reaching back to what's real? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, Diana said quietly. But you've always been the steady one, the strong one. I just thought maybe I'd bail you out again? Like I have your entire life? Diana flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? I put my life on hold for you, Diana. I worked double shifts to put you through college. I emptied my savings for your wedding, a wedding I wasn't even allowed to attend. I'll pay you back, Diana said quickly. As soon as things settle down financially. I raised an eyebrow. Financial problems too? Diana hesitated, then seemed to deflate. Elliot's family is blaming us for all the bad publicity. They've withdrawn some financial support they promised for our new house. And the honeymoon was mostly on credit cards because we'd gone so over budget on the wedding. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you're not, Diana said, a flash of her old perceptiveness returning. And I don't blame you. I treated you horribly. We sat in silence again, the weight of years of love and months of betrayal hanging between us. Do you think you could ever forgive me? Diana finally asked in a small voice that reminded me of when she was a child, coming to me after breaking Mom's favorite vase. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw both the woman who had cruelly cut me from her life and the girl I'd helped raise, who had once looked at me like I hung the moon. I don't know, I answered honestly. That depends on whether you're coming back to me because you truly regret what you did, or because your new perfect life is turning out to be not so perfect after all. Diana nodded slowly, accepting the truth of my words. As she was about to respond, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen showed Elliot with a wedding photo as the caller ID. She silenced it without answering. "I should go," she said, gathering her purse. "Elliot's already upset I'm not home preparing for dinner with his colleagues." She stood, then hesitated. "Can I call you again?" I found myself nodding despite my reservations. "You can try." As Diana walked away, I noticed something she'd left on the table, a small photograph, worn around the edges. It was us, aged maybe 10 and 6, arms around each other at the beach, gap-toothed smiles identical despite our 4-year age difference. I recognized it as the photo Diana had kept in her wallet throughout high school and college. I slipped it into my purse, uncertain whether it had been forgotten or deliberately left as a reminder of what we'd once been to each other. That night, alone in my apartment, I finally allowed myself to think about what I'd done. The venue disaster had been far more public and devastating than I'd intended. My revenge had spiraled beyond punishing Diana to potentially damaging her marriage and future. For the first time, I wondered if I'd gone too far, if in my hurt and anger, I'd become someone I didn't recognize. The satisfaction I'd felt watching Diana's perfect day crumble had curdled into something more complex. I didn't regret standing up for myself after years of sacrifice, but the collateral damage gave me pause. As I stared at our childhood photo, I wondered if there was anything left to salvage from the wreckage of our relationship, and whether either of us was brave enough to try. 2 months after our coffee shop meeting, Diana showed up at my apartment unannounced on a rainy Tuesday evening. When I opened the door, she stood dripping on my welcome mat, mascara streaking down her cheeks, hair plastered to her head. She looked nothing like the polished society wife she'd become and everything like my little sister after a bad day at school. "Elliot left," she said without preamble. I stepped aside to let her in. "What happened?" Diana sank onto my couch, leaving a wet imprint on the cushions. "He said he can't get past the wedding humiliation. His family keeps bringing it up at every gathering. The final straw was when his father's business rival made a joke about it at some charity gala." She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "He said marrying me was a mistake." I handed her a towel and sat beside her, close but not touching. "I'm sorry, Diana." "Are you?" she asked, not accusingly but with genuine curiosity. "Yes," I answered truthfully. "I never wanted your marriage to fail." Diana dabbed at her face with the towel. "That's the difference between us, isn't it? You still care about my happiness even after everything I did. While I—" She trailed off. "While you prioritized appearances over our relationship," I finished for her. She nodded miserably. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately. About how much I changed after meeting Elliot, how I let Vivian convince me that my real family wasn't good enough for my new life." She looked around my modest apartment. "I was so obsessed with fitting into their world that I forgot who I was." "And who are you, Diana?" I asked quietly. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. "For the past 2 years, I've been whoever Elliot and Vivian wanted me to be. I hardly recognize myself." We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the rain pattering against the windows and the distant hum of my refrigerator. "I miss who we used to be," Diana finally said. "I miss having a sister who knew the real me." Something in her words, the genuine longing, the acknowledgement of what we'd lost, broke through the walls I'd built around my heart. Without fully intending to, I found myself moving toward a confession. "Diana," I began, my voice unsteady. "There's something I need to tell you about the wedding venue." She looked up, confusion crossing her tear-stained face. "What about it?" I took a deep breath. "The venue didn't just happen to get shut down the day before your wedding. It was. I was the one who reported the safety violations." Diana stared at me, incomprehension slowly giving way to shock. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I made it happen," I continued, the words tumbling out now. "After you uninvited me, after everything, I was so hurt and angry. I discovered the venue had permit issues, and I reported them at exactly the right time to ensure they'd shut it down right before your wedding." Diana's expression shifted from shock to disbelief to dawning horror. You did that? On purpose?" I nodded, unable to speak further. She stood abruptly, moving away from me as if I'd struck her. "You deliberately ruined my wedding? You caused all of this?" "Not all of it," I said defensively. "The venue really did have violations. I just made sure they were discovered at the worst possible moment." "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Diana's voice rose, anger overtaking her previous vulnerability. "My marriage is over. Elliot's family thinks I'm a joke. Our wedding photos look like a disaster relief effort. I wanted you to feel a fraction of the pain I felt when you threw me away like garbage," I shot back, my own anger resurfacing. "When you decided I wasn't good enough for your perfect day after everything I'd sacrificed for you. So you destroyed my life to get even?" I reported legitimate safety issues. I didn't invent problems, they were already there. Your precious venue was cutting corners, probably because Elliot's father pulled strings to rush the permits through. Diana paced my small living room like a caged animal. "I can't believe this. My own sister." "Your own sister who you uninvited from your wedding," I reminded her. "Your own sister who you lied about to the entire family. Your own sister who put her life on hold for 15 years so you could have every opportunity. That doesn't give you the right to sabotage my wedding." "No," I agreed, suddenly exhausted. "It doesn't. But it helps explain why I did it." Diana stopped pacing and stared at me, really stared, as if seeing me for the first time. "Who are you?" she whispered. The Rachel I knew would never do something so vindictive. The Diana I knew would never have thrown away her sister for social status, I countered. People change when they're hurt badly enough. We stood facing each other across my living room, two strangers wearing the faces of sisters who had once been inseparable. The rain had intensified outside, thunder punctuating the heavy silence between us. "I'm going to tell everyone what you did," Diana finally said. "Elliot, his family, our parents, they all deserve to know." I nodded slowly. "You have that right. But before you do, ask yourself this: would you have come back to me if your life with Elliot had been perfect? Would you have ever acknowledged how deeply you hurt me if your wedding had gone off without a hitch?" Diana's expression faltered, uncertainty creeping in. "I'm not proud of what I did," I continued. "It was extreme and yes, vindictive. But I'm not sorry for finally standing up for myself after a lifetime of putting you first." Diana grabbed her purse. "I can't be here right now. I can't even look at you." She moved toward the door, then paused with her hand on the knob. "You know what's ironic? When everything was falling apart at the wedding, you were the person I wanted to call. Even after everything, you were still the one I thought would help me fix it." The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow felt more final than if she'd slammed it. I sank back onto the couch, uncertain whether I felt victorious or defeated. The truth was out, and with it, any illusion that our relationship could easily mend. I expected to be flooded with calls and texts, from Diana telling everyone what I'd done, from parents expressing their disappointment, from mutual friends choosing sides. Instead, there was only silence. Hours stretched into a day, then two. On the third day after our confrontation, a simple text arrived from Diana: "I understand why you did it." No elaboration, no forgiveness, but not the total rejection I'd feared. Just acknowledgement, the first step on what would be a long and uncertain path forward. 6 months passed before Diana and I met again. Half a year of cautious text exchanges, brief phone calls that carefully avoided discussing what had happened, and a gradual thawing of the ice between us. When she suggested meeting at Marino's, the Italian diner where we'd celebrated every major event of our childhood, I felt a flutter of hope that perhaps not everything was lost. I arrived early, sliding into our old favorite booth near the back. The vinyl seats were more cracked than I remembered, the laminated menus more faded, but the smell of garlic bread and marinara sauce remained unchanged, a sensory time machine to simpler days. Diana arrived precisely on time, looking both familiar and transformed. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect blowout that had become her uniform in recent years. Instead, she wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. She looked younger, more like the sister I'd grown up with. "Hi," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Hi," I echoed, suddenly unsure how to proceed. We ordered spaghetti and meatballs for me, eggplant parmesan for her, just as we always had, and sat in silence until our drinks arrived. "So," Diana finally said, stirring her iced tea. "My divorce was finalized last week." "I'm sorry," I said automatically. A small smile touched her lips. "Are you? Really?" I considered the question seriously. "I'm sorry you're hurting. I'm sorry things ended this way. But no, I'm not entirely sorry you're no longer with someone who would leave because of a ruined wedding." Diana nodded slowly. "That's fair. And surprisingly honest. I think we've had enough dishonesty between us," I said. "True." Diana took a sip of her tea. "You know what's strange? Looking back, I think our marriage was already in trouble before the wedding. Elliot was always more concerned with what his family thought than with what I wanted. The wedding disaster just sped up the inevitable." "That doesn't excuse what I did," I said quietly. "No," she agreed. "But it helps explain why I haven't spent the last 6 months hating you for it." Our food arrived, steaming plates placed between us like an offering. We fell into the old ritual of sharing, Diana passing me a piece of her eggplant, me giving her the extra meatball I knew she loved. "I've moved back to Hartford," Diana said between bites. "I'm staying with Mom while I figure out what's next." This was news to me. "You left the city? What about your job?" "I quit. It was Elliot's father's firm, the atmosphere was unbearable after the divorce." She twirled pasta around her fork. "Besides, I never really loved marketing. I just loved that it impressed people." "So what will you do now?" Diana shrugged. "I'm not sure yet. I'm taking some time to figure out who I am without Elliot, without Vivian controlling everything. Without the person I was pretending to be." She looked up at me. "I'm thinking about going back to school, actually. Maybe counseling." "You'd be good at that," I said, remembering how she'd always been the empathetic one as a child, bringing home stray animals and befriending the kids others ignored. "I hope so." Diana hesitated. "Rachel, I need to say something. What you did with the venue, it was extreme and it hurt a lot of people, not just me." I nodded, accepting the criticism. "I know. But," she continued, "I also understand why you did it. I was horrible to you. After everything you'd done for me, I treated you like an embarrassment, like someone I could discard when convenient." Her voice caught. "I let Vivian convince me that family was just another accessory you could upgrade when something better came along." "Why did you?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for months. "What happened to us, Diana?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I think I got caught up in a world that seemed magical compared to our normal life. Everything was perfect and polished and impressive. Vivian made me feel special, chosen, but only if I played by her rules." Diana looked down at her plate. "She said having you as maid of honor would highlight my humble origins at a time when Elliot's family needed to present a united front to some important business associates." "And you believed her?" "I wanted to believe I belonged in their world," Diana admitted. "I was terrified of being exposed as an imposter. Cutting you out felt like proving my loyalty to my new family." She looked up, eyes glistening. "It was the worst mistake of my life." I felt my own eyes filling with tears. "I missed you. Even when I was planning my revenge, I missed my sister." "I missed you too," Diana whispered. "Every time something good or bad happened, you were still the first person I wanted to tell." We ate in silence for a while, the weight of confession and acknowledgement settling between us. "I'm truly sorry," Diana eventually said. "For everything." Not just the wedding, but for how I changed, for taking you for granted, for not appreciating what you sacrificed for me. And I'm sorry for taking my hurt out on you in such a destructive way, I replied. I could have confronted you directly instead of going nuclear. Diana laughed suddenly, a genuine, surprised sound. God, you really did go nuclear, didn't you? The entire venue, completely demolished. It was actually scheduled for renovation anyway, I admitted. I just accelerated the timeline. Remind me never to get on your bad side again, Diana said, but there was no malice in her tone, just a hint of the sisterly teasing we'd once shared so easily. As we finished our meal, Diana reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. I almost forgot. This is for you. She slid it across the table. Inside was a check for $15,000, the exact amount I'd contributed to her wedding. Diana, you don't have to. Yes, I do, she interrupted firmly. It's not just about the money. It's about acknowledging what you've always done for me. I got a decent settlement in the divorce, and this is the first thing I wanted to do with it. I started to protest again, but something in her expression stopped me. This wasn't just repayment, it was a symbolic gesture, an acknowledgement of all I'd given and all she'd taken for granted. Thank you, I said instead, tucking the check into my wallet. As we prepared to leave, Diana hesitated. I was thinking. Mom mentioned that you never take vacations. What if we went somewhere together? Nothing fancy, just somewhere we could talk and maybe start to figure out who we are to each other now. The offer surprised me. You want to go on vacation with me? After everything? Especially after everything, Diana said. We've both changed. Maybe it's time we got to know each other again. She smiled tentatively. Besides, who else knows all my embarrassing childhood stories? As we walked out of the diner into the crisp autumn afternoon, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because everything was fixed, it wasn't, and might never be completely, but because for the first time since Diana had entered Elliot's world, we were seeing each other clearly again. Do you regret it? Diana asked suddenly as we stood in the parking lot. What you did with the venue? I considered the question carefully. I regret the extremity of it. I regret not finding a better way to make you understand how much you hurt me. I looked at her directly. But I don't regret finally standing up for myself after a lifetime of putting you first. That part I do again. Diana nodded slowly. I think I understand that now. We hugged goodbye, awkwardly at first, then melting into the familiar embrace of sisters who once knew each other better than anyone else in the world. Our relationship would never be the same as it once was. Too much had happened, too many harsh truths exposed. But perhaps we could build something new from the ruins, something more balanced, more honest, and ultimately stronger than what we'd lost. As Diana's car pulled away, I thought about the journey we'd taken, from the blind devotion of childhood, through betrayal and revenge, to this tentative new beginning. I didn't know where this reconstructed relationship would lead us, but for the first time in a long time, I was curious to find out. Have you ever experienced a family betrayal that tested the limits of forgiveness? How did you handle it? Did you walk away, get revenge, or find a path to reconciliation like Rachel and Diana? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this tale of sisterhood, revenge, and healing resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life family drama stories. Sometimes the hardest lessons come from those closest to us, but they can also lead to the most meaningful growth. Thank you for sharing this journey with me, and remember, family relationships are complicated, but recognizing when to stand up for yourself is just as important as knowing when to forgive.